The performances in Malevolent are pretty good. The house is an absolutely beautiful setting, and we have some really good camera work and some really good music. I'm saying all of this now because the rest of the film, the entirety of the narrative and the likability of the bulk of the characters, I can't really talk very positively about at all. Malevolent was released in 2018. It's directed by Olaf de Fleur Johansson and it's written by Ben Katai and Eva Konstantinopoulos, based on the novel Hush by Eva Konstantinopoulos. I've never read it. If you have any thoughts on how it compares, please feel free to share those thoughts. And we do have a really brilliant cast, including Florence Pugh as Angela. We also have Celia Imrie as Mrs. Greene, and that's the only character. Mrs. Greene is the only character who I liked, the only character who I thought was well written, who was interesting. The rest of them were either boring, irritating, or tremendously unlikable. And I think some of the characters are meant to be unlikable, so that's fair enough. But some of the others, who I think were meant to maybe have an emotional response towards, I just didn't like them. And then we have the narrative, and I feel like they tried really hard to make this dark, gripping, unpredictable, slightly twisty narrative. But it fails tremendously because the execution of the narrative is so slow. It's not scary. There is no horror in this whatsoever. And if it wasn't pitched as a horror film, I'd say fine, whatever. But it's definitely being marketed as a horror film, at least on IMDb, Letterboxd, etc. If they wanted to turn around and say, well, actually, we didn't make it as a horror, we made it as a slightly dark mystery, then I'd say fine, fair enough. But it definitely is being marketed as a horror, and there is no horror in this. There is not one scary element. There are a couple of maybe slightly suspenseful moments, and the payoff isn't there. It builds a little bit of suspense, and then it just falls flat immediately. But there is nothing in this that's scary. So if you're looking for a horror film, stay away from it. I should probably tell you what the film is actually about. I don't really recommend it, but I will tell you anyway. But I won't give any spoilers, just in case you decide to watch it. For example, you're a big fan of somebody in the cast and you want to check it out. Fair enough. It's about a group of young adults who go around allegedly telling spirits who are haunting houses or causing nuisance in houses to go away. And they're clearly not honest individuals, but they're getting away with this. And then Mrs. Greene calls them to her house, her beautiful, beautiful home. It is absolutely gorgeous. And I do think they made really great use of this space. We actually have Hunterston House in West Kilbride, which I'd never heard of. But it looks beautiful, absolutely stunning. The property is gorgeous. And that definitely helps to make it a teeny tiny bit better, marginally. But the actual narrative is just so boring. Things are supposed to get quite dark and suspenseful, and I don't want to say too much about what happens when this group of young adults go into this house to rid it of its spirits. The decision that I do think was very good, and obviously it's based on the book, so I'm assuming the decision came from the book, but the spirits, I don't want to say too much about them, but the spirits that are supposed to be in that house were really interesting, and there's a really fascinating backstory. So the events that happened before the film begins, really interesting. Our protagonist has a bit of an interesting backstory surrounding her mother. That's really interesting, but all of that happened before the film began, obviously. So the background information, really brilliant, but the events in the actual film itself, so tremendously boring. There are a couple of moments of suspense where it feels like something is about to happen and then nothing happens, or something happens where it seems like they tried to make it dramatic or a little bit scary, but it's not, and I'm just tremendously disappointed in it. It could work as a book, as the novel. I feel like the story had potential, but the execution in the film is just terrible. It really isn't very good at all. It's not scary. The characters are not likable. The performances are fine. The music is fine. The camera work fine. But the actual narrative is very slow. Not a lot happens. And when things do happen, I just don't think they got the atmosphere right at all. But I think there is potential there. As I said, the actual background surrounding the events of this house and Mrs. Greene is really fascinating, but badly delivered within the film. So if the novel is well written, I think it could be a really compelling story. I'm not curious enough to go and read it, but if it sounds like your kind of story, based on what I'm saying it's about, my advice would be to give the novel a go, if you're a reader, because I kind of wish I had first, because it sounds like it could be my kind of story, but the film's just ruined it for me. So I doubt I'll ever read it unless I come across it years down the line and forget that I've seen this film, which is certainly very possible. But otherwise, it's just a shame. It's a shame that I watched the film and then realised it was based on the novel, because it has potential. The story has potential, but as a film, it's pretty terrible. So unfortunately, I don't recommend it. If, as I said, you want to watch it, for example, if you love Celia Imrie, you want to see her in this, everybody's performances, absolutely fine. You'll probably enjoy their performances, even if you maybe don't like the characters. But if you're just looking for a good story, something that's suspenseful and scary and well-crafted, Malevolent is not the film you're looking for.